So if you're a Cowboys fan, I'm gonna warn you right now. I do have a little bit of a controversial take with this, especially in the mock draft. So if you get triggered easily, I'm just gonna give you the heads up, a little warning. You may want to dip. You may want to rip. Go find us something else, right? Because we're about to get into the nitty gritties of this football team and the Cowboys. The fan base, one of the most passionate fan bases out there about their football team. They're not afraid to go after Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, Dak Prescott, the organization as a whole. And I understand there's a lot to deep dive with this team. Let's start off with the roster. We'll get into a free agency plan and the mock draft. With this roster, offensive line, the interior is amazing. It's a very good interior. It's a top to bottom interior that can go up against anybody in the NFL, and they are very much a butt kicker type of interior offensive line with Tyler Smith, Cooper Beebe, Tyler Booker. Yeah, the Tylers out here, Tyler Guyton. They are very good in the run game. All these guys really are good run blockers. That's kind of the common theme about it. The tackle position is a problem, especially pass protection wise, but the interior, rock solid. Tyler Smith, Pro Bowl guard, dominant player. Cooper Beebe is a dominant run blocker. Needs to get better in pass protection. Booker, very good rookie season. Showed a lot of promise. He's so powerful with his hands. That guy can rip some people, man. It just comes down to the tackle position. This is an area that they still need to improve upon. Tyler Guyton, he was raw coming out of Oklahoma. They move him over to left tackle. It hasn't worked. He's also dealt with some injuries. Maybe some more time going into number 3 can get him to that standpoint. He is really a guy that going into year number 3 needs to take that leap. And I feel like his footwork has just not really gotten there. And he's almost like he doesn't really know. He's got the fast feet and everything like that, but he just doesn't really understand how to frame and load up blocks. Like that's his problem right now. So got to work on that. Maybe you transition him back over to right tackle. That might hone his develop, worsen his develop even more. Who knows? You can make so many different arguments. But Terrence Steele on the opposite side isn't much better in pass protection. I mean, he has some good games too. He's not terrible, but boy, is he more of a liability in pass pro than a ability to be consistent in that department. And it shows up game in, game out. He gets beat to the edge way too often. And a lot of times too, he maybe won't even get there to get to the edge rusher. That to me is a big problem. And they need help still in this tackle room. Do I feel comfortable with Nathan Thomas going into next season? No, I don't. I mean, he's definitely a guy that I feel good about as a swing tackle. And when he was out there, wasn't horrible. Once again, though, would I feel confident about that? No. They need to ideally find an upgrade here. Do you go out and you pay $20+ million for Rasheed Walker? Do you trade for somebody? These are all arguments that we're going to have to talk about. Do you draft somebody? Do you spend another first round draft pick on it? So many different routes that they could go, or maybe you just say, let's just stick with Terrence Steele. We're going to roll with it. Guyton, hope we develop him in year number 3, and we'll go from there. And that's possibly where they end up going. I have different opinions on it, right? And we'll get more into that. But that is definitely an area that they have to consider this offseason as an area that they need to upgrade. Besides that, the only other consideration that I would put here is the interior of the offensive line. TJ Bass, Brock Hoffman, Akeem Adeniji, Robert Jones, all free agents. Hoffman and Bass are restricted free agents. So I imagine one of those guys would be back at minimum, and then they could figure something out from there. Maybe bring 2 of those 4 guys back to have some depth, or you could draft somebody late. Now let's go on to the tight end room here. Not a huge need this year. It is something I would look at, especially on late day 3, as somebody who can be a 4th tight end that can compete going into 2027. Schoonmaker and Spanford are both free agents. Maybe they only bring back one of those guys. So drafting and developing somebody behind Jake Ferguson as a reliable number 2 could be a really good option. Especially with Schoonmaker not really panning out the way that they would have hoped, it would make sense to just draft somebody late. But this is not a high priority. You got Jake Ferguson, reliable player, especially around the red zone, chain mover type of guy, and Dak Prescott and him have a really good chemistry. I mean, he's got some issues and whatnot, but overall, I mean, he's still a good tight end, not going to blow by you or anything with his speed or any deceptiveness, but he's a really good tight end, solid tight end. On to the wide receiving core, another area that is not on the priority list because I do think George Pickens will get the franchise tag, and then ultimately they'll try to work out a longer term deal and go from there. And with that in mind, Pickens, Lamb, Flournoy, all that's a really good combination of wide receivers. Ryan Flournoy had stepped up this season in that wide receiver role, really beat out Tolbert and Cavante Turpin, Jonathan Mingo, and took that role and no problem. Like I feel good about this wide receiving core in general. There's just not a whole ton to say. Now, the depth wise, since Turpin didn't really take that step this year and they didn't really see him out that much, and special teams he took a bit of a step back. Maybe next season he gets better and whatnot, new special teams coordinator. Jonathan Mingo, he could be a cap casualty just to save a little money. That hasn't worked out at this point. And that's another area where maybe like Trayshawn Holden competes when he comes back next season, or they could re-sign Jalen Tolbert. They could draft somebody like fifth, sixth round to compete with Mingo. And then you go into training camp and maybe one of those guys ends up making the roster. That's kind of my approach on this. They could use a fifth, sixth type of draft pick, but that's it. This is not something that's an early priority as long as Pickens is back. Running back with Javonte Williams just re-signed, given a contract, very fair deal as well. This is not a huge priority for me. Your hope is Jaden Blue gets out of the doghouse a little bit, shows like he did at the end of the season there, shows off that burst, and can be a good, reliable number two back. I think he can be better than Miles Sanders. So you got Hunter Lupke, who's that versatile piece, can line up a little over everywhere as an H-back, hybrid fullback, solid blocker. And yeah, and then you got Phil Maffa. Maybe he can be another power back for them. Mark Davis can work in, especially on holidays and whatnot. Give you a little juice out there. You got Israel Ebandakanda, still a really young player as well. Not a high priority need. This would be something like late round draft pick, UDFA, maybe a cheap free agent. Those are really all the things you could do to get another guy in here. But I feel confident with Williams can be the lead back, and Blue, hopefully, year number two takes a bit of a jump there, or Maffa / Davis can work in as well. Davis, good story. On to the quarterback position, Dak Prescott. Very controversial take with Dak Prescott, but I've been a supporter of Dak Prescott. I get it. He in the big time games versus big time teams. That's really something he still needs to prove. I totally get it. I mean, him versus cover three has always been knocked about and talked about. I thought he did a way better job this season versus cover zero. And he handled it well. I mean, I don't know about the statistics, but just from watching the games, I thought he was pretty dang good versus blitzes this season. And that's a stat that can fluctuate year to year. In general, I thought Dak Prescott was not the problem. He was very good this season. They need to improve the defense, right? And then maybe the tackle position on offense. So it would just come down to, do you feel confident in Joe Milton being the backup? Will Greer could be back on the cheap. I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, he is under contract, so they gave him a futures deal. Joe Mixon, is he the long-term backup answer solution? That would be the only thing here. But I don't think this is something they need to worry about this offseason. But let's go on to the defense now. And this is where things start to get into that melting pot of, we got to have some help here. We got to address these needs. Christian Parker, new defensive coordinator, comes in from the Eagles, formerly two of the Denver Broncos. And I think he started out with the Green Bay Packers. He's got a pretty good resume. I love the hire. It's going to be a fun one. He's going to be transitioning to more of a 3-4 defense that will more than likely, for 60-70% of the packages, run 4-2-5, 6-7, 6-7. No, we're juggling all that stuff. We need to juggle the defensive line right out here. I feel like, too, the kids aren't saying that as much now than the adults, so we just got to keep saying it, right? But anyway, it's not as cool anymore. And I always been saying this to people like, hey, we got to do our own thing, right? To show up these kids nowadays. We got to come out with our own cool stuff. We got to get our own drip or whatever they call it. But with this edge room, they got to improve it, right? It is an area that needs to add some talent. Even if you bring back Jadeveon Clowney, they need to add to this room, whether it's free agency, the draft, both. They need to add to it. My thing here would be between like Dante Fowler, Sam Williams, Peyton Turner, all free agents. Maybe they bring back one of those guys. The dude that would make the most sense out of this is Sam Williams. He's a good special teamer. He just hasn't shown a whole ton on the field consistency wise. And that's a little unfortunate, second round pick. But if they can bring him back on a cheap, prove it type of contract, it might make sense to do that. James Houston was their second best pass rusher, really, besides, Jadeveon Clowney was their clear best player on their edge position. Donovan Ezraku, I like Ezraku a lot. He's just a guy that's going to have to continue to get better, get stronger, all those sort of things. And I still think he can be a really good contributor for this football team. Overall, though, yeah, we got to add either a first round pick, one of their first round picks, free agent pickup, maybe both. They need help here, and we're going to address that. The interior wise looks really, really good. Kenny Clark played excellent this season for them after trading for him. Same thing with Quinn Williams, played really, really good. I mean, dealt with that short term injury there. Osa Digizua had a bit of a step back this season. Going into this next season, I'll be interested to see how they play him, if they're gonna try to use him more as like a 4-eye, even though I think he's probably still more of a 3 tech in a 3-4 defense. I think that Quinn Williams is a guy that they can play all across the defense line. He's a guy that can line up at 0 all the way to 5 technique. He's just that talented of a dude. He's a freak, right? I'm a Jets fan, and you're like, "A Jets fan? Oh my gosh!" But you know about pain too, right? Yeah, I know it's crazy, but Quinn Williams is a stud. You got a stud. Kenny Clark is a stud. That now Clark, I still think he could line up. It's 0. I'm like him to be in a rotation base at this point, but he can definitely line up at that 0 still, even if you want to put him across the board from 3 to 0. Osa, Thomas, Clark, Williams, all these guys. Perron Winfrey's a guy to watch out for too. Still some talent there. Maybe he can develop and get into a really good rotation there, or maybe ends up beating out Solomon Thomas for a roster position. They could move on from Solomon Thomas and save a couple $1 million in cash. Jay Toia from UCLA, their late round draft pick, he would be more of a 0 that could actually benefit from Christian Parker's new scheme and rotate in there with like a guy like Kenny Clark and Quinn Williams. Yes, we will be looking at the defensive line, the edge position specifically. On to the linebacking core now. And you got Kenneth Murray. He won't be back. Like, let's just be real. He won't be back. They need to upgrade here. We're going to be looking at doing that. Demarion Overshown, got to stay healthy, but he's still a building block. And it's clear that he's a building block for this football team. Once again, just got to stay healthy. Shamar James had some flashes, but, he's another guy that's more of like, I feel like a rotational third, fourth linebacker. And then Maurice Luafau might benefit from a 3-4 change, actually, because he's got more of that blitzing ferocity that Christian Parker might like. He might actually be a better scheme fit than Shamar James in the 3-4 system that he's going to instill as more of that thumper between the tackles type. So watch out for Luafau. This might be his best opportunity for the Cowboys to see what he brings to the table, because I thought he was a really, really good blitzer at Notre Dame. Overall, though, this is an area that you're either looking at Sonny Styles in the draft, or whether you want to go after an Anthony Hill, pick 20, or you trade back and go into the second round and you get Anthony Hill or CJ Allen or Hosea Trotter, all those options. Jacob Rodriguez later if you trade back even further. Plenty options there in the draft. Free agency, there's a lot of options as well. They're going to have to come out with a game plan. I mean, I think Caden Ellis, I think Leo Chanel, I think Nakobe Dean, all really good scheme fits for what Christian Parker could want on this defense. They're going to have to come up with that game plan, and what kind of strategy do they feel like Sonny Styles makes it to 12? Because if they feel confident Styles going to make it 12, which personally I am not going to project, because I do think Styles Downs will be off the board by 12, but you never know, right? Good players fall in the draft. If one of those guys falls on them, you're taking that guy, I feel like. But linebacker Sonny Styles would be a dream pick for sure. We'll see what happens. I also think there are guys that they can address this in free agency in combination with the draft. Also, I didn't mention Jack Sanborn. He's a free agent, and he's more of an Eberflus type of guy. I don't think he will be back for this team. Let's go on to the cornerback position here. Duron Bland, Siobhan Revel, and were talked about as core pieces for this football team. And that makes a lot of sense. And I think they're going to be your outside corners for this football team. And that opens the spot with the way that they were talking about it, and what seems like Parker is going to want is somebody who can play like a hybrid, who almost plays like a safety in the slot. Like, he's going to want like a safety prototypical tough guy there in the slot that can also cover, of course, and be that dude that can handle and be out there on 4-2 packages, 4-2-5 packages, and you don't have to take him off the field, in other words, and he's not a liability. That's kind of the mode that I'm looking for. So in terms of draft or free agency options, an Alante Taylor would make a lot of sense for this team. A Minka Fitzpatrick trade would make a lot of sense for this team draft-wise. Yeah, a Downs would be fun. A Dylan Thieneman would be really interesting here. Let me think who else. You got like Jalen Kilgore would be a really fun one if they want to wait on more like a third, fourth round type of draft pick, even though they don't have a third round, but if they traded down, etc. I think, I mean, maybe I'll make Neil Warren. I think he's more of a safety, but he could play a little hybrid role for them. There are guys. That's kind of the mold of player that I would be looking for. I mean, Caleb Downs too would be able to play that role. So either which way, that is the mold, the cloth that I think that this team is going to be looking for more than an outside corner. The more I've done digging and researching on this new coaching staff and the way that they're talking Stephen Jones, Jerry Jones, they are going to be looking for more of like a big nickel defend, DB approach to this slot position and keeping Revel and Bland on the outside. And talking about Revel, he's a guy, as Parker was saying, who can play at the line of scrimmage, press coverage. He's tough, you know what I mean? And Bland on the opposite end. That's really the big thing that they're going to be going after. Kalen Carson, Josh Butler could be back on the cheap. You got Turquoise Bridges there, who kind of struggled in my opinion, but he could be a rotational player too for them. CJ Goodwin will probably be gone after this season. He may get hired on as a special teams, assistant or something. Who knows? Corey Ballantyne, I don't think he'll be back either. So those are all things we'll have to look at. No matter what, though, we're gonna have to look at it. I still like Revel. He struggled, but a lot of it too was, I think, partially on the scheme and playing him like in an off coverage. Like it just didn't make a whole ton of sense. Revel's a guy you put on the line of scrimmage, you let him be a pump and run corner. That's his game. That's who he is, right? And they didn't play to his strengths. He's also coming off an injury, so the ranking's low. But I actually really do like Revel, and I still think he can be a really good football player for this team. Reddy Stewart was fine. I thought he was a good rotational piece, somebody that I would want to compete, but not ideally go into next season as the starter. Let's go on to the safety room. This might be the biggest need on the roster. Like, let's just be real. Other than edge, safety is right there. They need safety. And that's why, actually, going through this, I think they need safety more than they need a corner. And when Donovan Wilson being a free agent, Malik Hooker could be somebody they cut and move on from. They want to save a little bit of cap / dollar amount. Dollar amount is not too bad from Malik Hooker. And he's a guy that does bring some communication, bring some leadership, all those sort of things. So if they wanted to keep him for those sort of experience, that would make a lot of sense. Then you draft somebody you develop behind Malik Hooker for a season, certainly an option. It's just going to come down to what they want to do, who they see on free agency or the draft, etc. You got Nia Thomas, who's a restricted free agent. They're going to have to make a decision on if they want to give him a $3.5 million transition sort of tag, or tender. And then you Marquise Bell. Now, Marquise Bell is also another guy that could play a big nickel role for them. So keep an eye on that if Parker says, hey, let's go and use him in this role. You got Donovan Wilson. I said, I don't think he'll be back. So we'll see how things go there. But safety, a big need. Now, let's go on to the coaching staff here. You got Clayton Adams returning as the OC. Obviously, Brian Schottenheimer. You got Shoddy as the coach. And then you got Shoddy's like a melody. But then you got Christian Parker now coming in as the defensive coordinator. Very curious to see how Christian Parker does with this defense. But I'm excited. I think this was one of the sneaky hires of the offseason. Not just for this team, but in general. I thought Christian Parker was a really good hire for them. And as a Jets fan who we were looking at defensive guys, wouldn't have mind this guy right here. So we'll see how things go. It is too early to tell, but definitely a dude with a lot of promise. He's only a 34-year-old guy too. So he's taking on some big roles and coached some good players, right? Surtans, and most recently with the Eagles and the new Legion of Boom or whatever the heck you want to call it over in Philadelphia with Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell and Reed Blankenship and all those guys, right? So this coaching staff looks pretty solid. Let's go on, though, to the free agency strategy here. And we have got to make some decisions now. It's decision time. Terrence Steele, the first and only cut that I'm going to make here. There are other guys that could be in consideration, especially maybe after the draft. And even Terrence Steele could be an after the draft guy. If I think realistically, they're probably going to keep Terrence Steele. Like, that's my opinion. But this is a decision that I am making. I try to balance some realism too, because I think it's important. You don't want to go too crazy or anything like that. But Steele is a guy that I just feel like you need to try to find an upgrade if you can. And I think there's some guys between the draft, free agency, you can figure out an upgrade. You save $14 million. $14 million is quite a bit of cash that they can use elsewhere on the roster. Defensively, you can sign yourself a stud safety, a linebacker, an edge rusher, possibly maybe an edge rusher, but more of maybe a DB, a corner / whatever, right? There are options there that you can use that $14 million and we can find an upgrade for Terrence Steele. That's my view on it. But once again, we'll see what they end up doing here. Going on to the team resigns. George Pickens, obvious. We're going to give him the tag, $28 million range. You got Robert Jones. I decided to bring back Robert Jones. I'll talk more about that when we come into the restricted period, but he was a guy I'm like, all right, he's coming off an injury. Look into a little bounce back scenario for him. If we have an injury, Robert Jones can step up into that guard position. Defensively wise, Jadeveon Clowney is a no-brainer for me. Now, scheme-wise, will he be a fit for Parker and his defense? I think so. I mean, Clowney's been in the 3-4. He's been in the 4-3. He's not a guy you want to drop back into coverage, so maybe that's something Parker says, he's going to be more of a specialist guy or something like that. And can he put his hand in the dirt as a 5-tech? Maybe, but we'll see how things work out there with Clowney. He does want to be back for camp, so I'm guessing that he will try to be signed before those situations and OTAs. Let's go on to Sam Williams here. He's one of those guys where it's hit or miss. If they want to bring him back, then I'm fine with it, but it has to be a cheap contract. It has to be 2.5 or under, in my opinion. It can't be, I'm not looking to give him like a $5 million deal or anything like that. He can come back, special teams, prove it type of contract. Didn't re-sign anybody else here. Going on the restricted period, exclusive restricted period, TJ Bass, Brock Hoffman. As I said earlier, we might have to make a decision between these two guys. Hoffman, I went ahead and chose to go after him and retain him. Good, solid backup center. Can also play a little guard. But by bringing in Jones, I feel like it was a little bit easier, a little cheaper. You got Jones as your backup guard. Hoffman is your backup center. Reddy Stewart, self-explanatory, exclusive restricted. Same thing with Josh Butler as he comes back from injury. When Thomas, I went ahead and let go of just because I'm going to try to upgrade the position. So there's that. But I could see them bringing him back. Just maybe they let him go and then they bring it back later on a cheap contract or something like that. Brandon Aubrey, I know he's talking about $10 million right now. That'd be kind of a lot. I'm okay with $7 million possibly on an extension like that. But for right now, just give him a second round tender and then work out a deal later on this offseason. That's kind of where I'm at right now. And then you budget in a little bit of miscellaneous expenditure. That is just a very miscellaneous amount for, extended injuries and all that sort of stuff down the line. Now, here we go. It's outside free agency period. And you're probably looking at the cash spend right now and you're like, oh my goodness, that's crazy. You're spending way over their budget. Why are you doing that? Well, first and foremost, a cash budget is really the numbers that I use is just basically what it's an average of the percentage of cap that they have spent over the past, 3 to 5 years. And that's where you come up and you can project a budget based on of that. This offseason, though, I feel like Jerry Jones has kind of already mentioned that it's go broke. Like they're gonna spend, right? They want to spend. And that's where I came up with the fact that I think they're going to try to spend $350+ million this offseason and try to do what the Eagles have done. Remember, the Eagles, to build their roster, they were spending in this category. Cap doesn't matter. Let's just be real. Teams, until the NFL cracks down and says, oh, you can't do this, or the limitations on those sort of things, teams can just get away with it. They're just going to be able to keep rolling over the cap and moving money down to the future. Like, it's just a never-ending thing. So the Piper doesn't really come to fruition. You see it with all the time, like with a team like the Saints. Like, they've been a prime notorious candidate, but the Eagles, of course, have been able to do this. So they're competing, they're getting competitive rosters, spending more money, and then just moving that money in the future. And they're just going to keep doing that. So maybe Jerry Jones going to say, hey, enough's enough. We're going to go out and spend a little bit of money from the sounds of it. And some of my numbers may be a little bit off, but cash is king. Cash is really what matters at the end of the day, not cap. But without that hoopla talking about, let's go on to the actual signings here. No offensive signs. We are starting with defense, and defense is the biggie. Caden Ellis. He is that dude that you put up in the middle of the defense, can be that hammer in the middle, also a leader. I think he's a perfect fit for what Parker's going to want on this defense. So Christian Parker is going to be looking for, I feel like, a guy like Caden Ellis, Nakobe Dean, Leo Chanel. And yeah, so 2-year deal, $24 million, very fair contract for a guy that's also been reliable. He's been available, not a whole ton of injury history. That's the reason why I opted to go against Nakobe Dean. Just some of that injury history. I still think Nakobe Dean's a great sign and would be somebody that, familiarity with Christian Parker would make a lot of sense. I also want to keep it maybe just one Eagles. I don't want to go too crazy. All right, so we got Reed Blankenship. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Ellis, going to be a nice addition to their linebacking core. I also got Landon Roberts, who's a nice 3-4 hammer type of guy, good run defender, and can be a rotational player. If you have injuries with Demarion Overshown, then Roberts can certainly step in and be a good number 2 guy there with Ellis. And then we go on to Alante Taylor. He is the mold that I think they're going to look for. Really tough nosed guy there, run defense, kind of like a safety type of profile that can cover, right? And certainly feisty at the catch point. He's a tough blitzer as well. I just think he fits exactly the type of player that they're going to look for. I mean, Jordan Lewis actually is another type that they would really want. And I'm sure that if Jordan Lewis was up for contract this season, the Cowboys would have extended him because he would have been an ideal fit. Anyway, he's with the Jaguars now, and that is what it is. But they go get Alante Taylor, and he would be the highest paid slot corner for this amount, 3 years, $45 million, $15 million. It would outpace Kyler Gordon's deal. I mean, if you want to clump in Byron Murphy as a slot corner, but he plays more on the outside, he plays a little in outside versatility. So there's that. But Alante Taylor would be, I guess, the true. Alante Taylor plays on the outside too, but he, in this case scenario, you'd be putting him in there in the slot. I just feel like he fits that mold. And then we finally finish it up with Reed Blankenship here. The experience in the back end, that communication that he brings to the table is kind of invaluable, especially for Christian Parker, who's going to be trying to instill this new scheme for this football team, having that familiarity in the back end. Blankenship's a very, very instinctual player. He's the type of guy that just kind of like sees it and goes, right? He's not one of these guys going to hesitate. He's just going to see it and go, make that play. He's a good tackler. He's not an elite athlete, but he's a solid enough athlete. He's got good burst, and his calling card is his overall understanding of the game. And once again, like he can still man match sort of things. He's just not going to be a guy you line up in the slot, right? He's not that type of guy. He's certainly not like a Minka Fitzpatrick type. But in the back end, in a split safety sort of role that he does for the Eagles and what he's going to do here, it makes a lot of sense. So let's go ahead and talk about the roster here before the draft. And once again, the needs real quick. Offensive tackle. I think you know where this is going. I mean, I'm sure you probably already skipped and you're at this point, but offensive tackle, big area I'm going to be looking at. Other than that, on offense, wide receiver, tight end, running back, possibly late. Nothing really too crazy to worry about there. Defensively wise, we got to look at an edge rusher, big need. Okay, we brought back Jadeveon Clowney. We got Azaraku year number 2. Sam Williams back. Houston is a situational pass rusher, but we need another dog in here in a 3-4 alignment. Corner, outside cornerback, I feel good about with Bland, Revel year number 2. You got some depth with Carson, Bridges, Butler. Stewart as a good rotational player there with Alante Taylor. Remember, Taylor can play on the outside, so if you have injuries, Taylor can switch over to the outside. Stewart can line up there in the slot. And that's why I'm not super worried about the cornerback position and still more worried about the safety position, finding a good understudy behind Malik Hooker, big time priority. And then Marquise Bell could also play a little big nickel slot for them too. Linebacker, we got Caden Ellis, Atlanta Roberts. I feel good about the linebacking core. I think we're in a good spot here. Of course, like if Sonny Styles still falls to them at 12, like would I do that? Absolutely. I'd still rock in that because I think Sonny Styles could be a Hall of Fame type of player. He's really, really good. But Ellis with Overshown, I love that combination. I think that Roberts works in there as that third veteran guy, and he could play on early downs if they wanted him to. Shamar James, Maurice Luafau, and especially Luafau. He's another guy that could be a situational blitzer for them. It's draft time, though, now, and let's get into the controversial takes, right? And you're probably looking at the board, you're like, oh my gosh, you did what? You would never be the GM of the Cowboys. Oh my goodness, you would get fired on day one. You know what? I probably would. But you know what? This is my opinion, and I'm gonna try to sell it to you, right? Get the sales go. Sounds slimy just talking about that. But Caden Proctor, let's start off with Caden Proctor here. I am such a big Caden Proctor fan. He might be my number 2 tackle. I'm still putting him at number 3 right now. So I'm having Mawanoa, Fanu, Proctor. All 3 of those guys are first round guys, in my opinion. Lomu, I'm okay with in the first round. I think he's also a guy that could start right away. After that, it's like Freeling in with Ihana Choi. That would probably be my round 2, round 3 guys. And then you'd have a drop off even from there for your Blake Millers and your Diego Pounds, Demetrius Crownovers, etc. Isaiah Worlds, all those guys. With Proctor, though, I am such a fan. I've watched every game of him pretty much of this season, except for like the FCS game or anything like that. He is just so impressive at his size, so strong. I like his independent hand usage. He's got long arms. So while you look at maybe the R. Mason Thomas's games and you say, oh, he got the best of him to the edge, I also thought some of it was on Ty Simpson not being able to step up in the pocket. If he would have been able to step up, it would have helped out Proctor and not having to get out there. And don't get me wrong, like Proctor's foot speed is not unbelievable. But what he does do, and he's kind of the opposite of Tyler Guyton. Guyton has great foot speed, but he doesn't know how to, use his footwork. He's just not comfortable. Proctor's the exact opposite. His footwork, he knows exactly how to get to his landmarks. So while he doesn't have the foot speed of some of these other, extremely athletic tackles, I'd rather take a guy that knows how to get to his landmarks and actually be able to mirror guys. That's Proctor. I think he is so, so good with his feet and with his hands already. He's are improving so much in his independent hand usage. His length is fantastic. So even if you have that speed, he'll just stick out his left arm and he'll be able to stab you out there, and he's fantastic at that. He has the best block that I have seen out of any tackle. I believe it was last season when Milroe was the quarterback. He made this two-hand block where he effectively blocked two defense. I think one was a defensive lineman and one was a DB blitzing or something like that. Maybe two defensive linemen. I don't remember exactly, but it was two players, each with hand, and it allowed Milroe to get the ball out. It was the best block that I have seen in a long time from an offensive lineman. It was incredible. I'll have to pull out the film. I'll have to go take a look at that somewhere. But Proctor, huge fan. He's the guy that I think you put at left tackle, you move Guyton over to right tackle. Your offensive line would probably then compete with the Eagles as the biggest offense. It might be bigger in terms of weight and power, veracity. Dude, just imagine Proctor at left tackle, Smith at left guard, you got BB at center, you got Booker at right guard, and then Guyton over at right tackle. That offensive line is a mean mugging machine. Proctor, too, I think has the most projectable tape out of any of the offensive tackles in this draft. You talk about the ability you to see him in 7-step drops consistently in that offense. Like, this is not the old Alabama offense with Nick Saban. They run a very heavy drop back pass offense there, and you see Proctor full on game in, game out in NFL pass sets all the time. Whereas Fanu, there's a lot more of a projection with that. And that's why I'm kind of leaning on, hey, Proctor. I can see Proctor being a better football player than Maui Noah and Fanu. I think he's got, upside to be a Hall of Famer. So there's that. I'm not, go too crazy out here, but I'm a fan, but maybe let's not go too crazy. I like him. I think he's going to be a really good starter for whoever drafts him. And I have him as top 15 player, obviously, as you can see here, drafting the number 12. And make a strength an even better strength. Another point I want to hit home too is if you look at the draft order behind me, all right, and you say to yourself, okay, out of the top 10 in the draft order, which of those teams have a top 10 offensive line? Maybe the Chiefs, or maybe the Commanders if they're fully healthy have an okay, decent offensive line. But then you look at the bottom 10 of the order, right? The Super Bowl contenders, the playoff teams. Which of those teams have a top 10 offensive line? The correlation, right? I mean, yes, quarterback, and it's a team. Defense is always big. But you talk about the Rams, you talk about the Broncos, you talk about the Jags, the Eagles, the Bears, the Bills, even the 49ers are a borderline top 10 unit. They're in maybe 15 range. So maybe that you don't include them. They all have top 10 offensive lines, right? So you look at the difference there and you showcase that. When you have a top 10 offensive line, there's a very good chance that you are going to be contending for a Super Bowl. So that's kind of my view and my little last sales pitch on this. Adding a strength to a strength, improving the offensive line is never a bad approach, even though their defense, I know, needs a lot of help. Now, we can address some defense here with Cassius Allen, and hit me up with any questions on Caden Proctor. I'm totally up for it. I'm really, really excited about Proctor. So there's that. Cassius Howell here with their pick number 20. I'm also a big Cassius Howell fan. If you've watched me a couple years back when he was playing for Bowling Green, he was on my list that I was just super high on. And he was one of those dudes that I had a draft crush on from the very beginning. And it's just, he's a guy for me. And I'm going to stick with this. Like, he is just going to be one of those dudes that I have a draft crush on. So maybe that bias is in my mind. But every time I watch Cassius Howell, he has got insane bend. Oh my gosh. His ghost moves are insane. I love, you know what? You talk about like a Micah Parsons level of twitchy athlete. Cassius, he's not as good of that. He doesn't have the power profile of a Micah Parsons, so I don't want to go too crazy or anything like that. He's not as good of a prospect as that, but he has some of that to his game. And in a 3-4, this is where Cassius Howe is going to win. And he howls off the edge consistently, right? Like that's his name, that's his game, that's his plan. He also has sneaky power. All right, he can run down you too, but he definitely wants to win by getting around the edge. His run defense is not as bad as you think. Like he can hold enough of the point of attack, and he can definitely drop into coverage. He's made some very instinctual plays. Sometimes where he's rushing, but then he sees it in his eyes, and he's like, you know what? No, I'm going to drop back, and I'm going to, pass deflection. I'm going to jump up and get this ball. He's really got the nose for that too. So I just think he's a great scheme fit. Love the way he plays. He's a dog for me. He is an absolute dog. I think he's being underrated in the draft. And once again, he's a kind of a my guy sort of thing. Now let's go on to day 3 here. Bud Clark, TCU safety, had a great Senior Bowl. He's not an elite athlete, but he's a good athlete. He's a too high safety type of profile. Him and Reed Blankenship, there's some parallels there. They're both guys. I mean, I think he's a better athlete than Blankenship is, but he's a great instinctual reader type of dude, right? And he's also a dude that can come down and play in the box, can play in the slot because he's got the coverage skills. He's more of that guy that can play all over the field. He might go a little earlier than this. I think he's going to go third, fourth round. If he's not available, you could look at a guy like AJ Halsey would be another dude that would be very interesting in this scenario. Maybe he falls because of lack of athleticism with Halsey. We'll see how he tests and all those sort of things. The Key Wheatley would be another option here. Dylan Johnson. There's some guys in this range. I also think that Traden Stukes would be a really fantastic fit for this football team. Oh, yeah. I like Stukes a lot. He's another underrated guy. But that's kind of the mold of player that I'm looking for. And I think one of those guys ends up being available. Bud Clark is a 6-year player. He has some injury history. So you have to deal with some of those, things that you have to look at and whether the medicals check out. And even though he was really, really good at the Senior Bowl and his tape was really nice, he is an older prospect. All things you have to consider here. And that's why I think this is a very fair range, but he could go a little bit earlier than this. So I just want to kind of keep that heads up here. But since people might look at it that I reached for Proctor and Howe, I'm trying to throw in some steals here too. And I think Clark would be a steal in the 4th round. A great player to have behind Malik Hooker and actually could end up beating out Malik Hooker and winning that job. Like it wouldn't shock me. And then they could cut him, save some money there. Nick Barrett, South Carolina, defensive tackle that can be another rotational zero, across even a rotational player across their defensive line because he's got some good time size and length profile. They can play on their defensive line up and down, but more as an interior run defender at zero. That makes a lot of sense for Nick Barrett. He's a good run defender, not a whole ton of pass rushing chops. He can at least work in there with Clark and Williams and Jay Toia, et cetera, on their defensive front. And then you got Eric Rivers here, wide receiver from Georgia Tech. He's a speedster, right? He's got some good speed, solid route runner, actually. He's got some good route running ability. And I think he can be a good complement to what they have here in Pickens and Lamb and Flournoy and also, if it depends on who they keep around a bit between Mingo or whatever. Like he could end up being a long-term Kevontae Turpin replacement as well, special team type ability. So that's kind of my view on it with Eric Rivers. John Michael Gillenborg here from Wyoming, the tight end who's had a rough season, had a rough Senior Bowl. I think it's going to drop him quite a bit into that 5th, 6th, 7th round range. I still like Gillenborg. I still think he could be a good player and let him develop here. He's got good athleticism, good traits. He's got good time, tight end size as well. Needs to get stronger as a blocker. But as a 4th tight end for this football team, I'm cool with that. And it could be their long-term number 2, number 3 type of guy. You got Aiden Garnes here from Arizona. I've not watched him at all, but that Arizona secondary was so good. I've watched a ton of Stukes, so I'm sure I've seen some inadvertently stuff on him. I've also watched Dalton Johnson, a safety there. He's another good player as well, but I think Stukes and Johnson are fantastic football players. I'm just going to take corner here from Aiden Garnes to finish that for their secondary. And they got Noah Whittington from Oregon, running back, I watched him. He is a guy that is a north-south runner, like one cut type of guy. He's got a nice juke and kind of go. And I think he fits the scheme really well. Inside zone ability. He's not like an outside zone speedster or anything like that. He's not going to be a crazy receiving back or anything, but he can be a good change of pace player. And yeah, I mean, he's got some explosive. He's not the most explosive guy, but I think he can be a good in between the tackles runner for this football team in a rotational role. And that's what I'm looking for here is just a little bit of rotation, just in case, right? So that is the draft, the controversial takes. They're all done now. All right, I know. Get that out of the way. You're probably sweating out here like, whoo, man, that is getting greasy. But you look at the offensive line, Caden Proctor at left tackle, Tyler Smith. That is just an insane offensive line right there on that left side. Across the board, this offensive line could be a top tier unit. And yes, I love it. I really do. It's one of my favorite things that I really took so much time and process and what I wanted to do for this Dallas Cowboy team and going back and forth and stuff. Like I just love Proctor and the way he fits onto this offensive line. Man, I love it so much. And you know, another way to look at it too is like when you control when your offensive line is controlling the line of scrimmage, you're able to control the clock, time of possession, helps out your defense trying to sell even more, right? Woo, man, those slime, woo. Watching too many slimy car salesmen, I guess, stuff. I don't know. I wouldn't be able to do that job. Sounds difficult. Anyway, you go ahead and add some depth here with guys like Eric Rivers, Noah Whittington, John Michael Gillenborg. Add some depth on the offense. And then on the defense, we make a lot of upgrades, especially in free agency. Kaden Ellis, Reed Blankenship, and Alante Taylor all going to be impacts right away for them. Yeah, and Bud Clark for the future. Slash could play early on too, especially if, he could beat out Malik Hooker. Wouldn't shock me. And then you also draft some guys like Aiden Garnes and Nick Barrett to be rotational players. And then our other first round selection, immediate impact there with Cassius Howe. With, of course, you got James Houston, you got Donovan Ezraku, and Jadavion Clowney, and Sam Williams is a fifth guy. Maybe Isaiah Land can work in there. So, all in all, that is our overall approach to this roster, free agency plan, mock draft. Let me know what you think, agree or disagree, Cowboys fans. One last note I do want to mention here. I like Jerry Jones a lot, and I think Jerry Jones is a great guy. I mean, I've never met the dude. I really think Jerry Jones is hated on way too much. And it's just something that sometimes I get it. Like when you lose and you're not a winning team, you just want to hate the ownership and stuff. I'm a Jets fan, and it's like it's easy to hate on Woody Johnson, and I'm not a huge fan of Woody Johnson. I'll be real, but Jerry Jones, the guy that I just feel like cares so much for the team, for the players, the organization, everything like that. I don't know. Yes, you have to get past some of the personalities, but everybody's got a different personality, right? Like that's just what it is. And if he was winning, everybody would love Jerry Jones, right? It's just sometimes when you lose games and you're not winning, they haven't won a Super Bowl in what 25 years or whatever it's been, you're gonna naturally have a tendency like, okay, this is not good. What's going on here? The reality is it's tough to win the Super Bowl, right? It's tough to make runs in playoffs. And it's not just that they haven't won a lot of playoff games. And I get that. So things need to be changed. And I'm sure they're looking at changing some things. But I like Jerry Jones as a person. I just hate to see kind of him getting bashed like as a person. It's one thing to say, well, you know what, this is not good as a team, but I don't know. I like Jerry Jones, and I just want to throw that out there because I do think he's hated on way too much. That's my 2 cents. I like Jerry. I like his story, and he's definitely a guy that, hey, I don't know the guy, so I'd have to meet him to really do all those sort of things. But generally speaking, I think Jerry's a fun guy and somebody that really cares for this football team, and I always respect that, right? I really do. I respect that. He's very passionate about it. And also watched him on Landman, which is pretty cool. And he had a good story there too. I always think that was interesting. It's a good show. I'll say that right now. If you need to go watch Landman, it's awesome. I hope you guys have a good day though. Let me know what you think, agree or disagree, and keep it cool and keep the vibe rolling.